Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Mike Norvell and the Florida State Seminoles do it again in the transfer portal, landing Keon Coleman, the former wide receiver from Michigan State. Florida State's had a really, really good offseason in the transfer portal. As a Michigan fan, I am phenomenally happy that we do not have to play Keon Coleman again because he's an absolute dog. And you take a look at what this Florida State offense is going to look like. The size and the ball skills of some of these wide receivers and just pass catchers in general, because you had a guy like Kyle Morlock at the tight end position as well. Like Jordan Travis has to be absolutely thrilled, and the defensive backs in the ACC have to be absolutely upset. You look at Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson. You add Hakeem Williams, the true freshman, who is 6'3 plus. Kyle Morlock, who's 6'7. There are just so many big bodies in this Florida State offense. Jordan Travis is going to have a blast. Defensive coordinators are going to have fits. A massive, massive get for Mike Norvell and the Florida State Seminoles. Now, before we get into it again, just want to say thank you to you guys. The transfer portal has been wild. It's been very successful for Florida State. We've recapped it a couple times. We'll take a look back at some of their additions after we talk a little Keon Coleman. But again, if you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And for Florida State fans, like this seems to be one of the better recruiting classes this 2024 class is becoming. So stay locked in for that. It's going to be an active summer in Tallahassee. So again, appreciate you guys. Subscribe to the channel if you do enjoy the content. We appreciate all the support. Let's talk a little Keon Coleman. Former basketball. He actually played basketball at Michigan State too. And that's the biggest thing when you look at his game. That's what you see. Like Peyton Thorne last year, for the last 2 years really, was just like, oh, Keon Coleman's down there. We're going to throw the football up there and let him go make a play. And a lot of times he did. You go back and watch that Michigan game. I remember all too well. The only successful plays they had on offense in 2022 against Michigan was pretty much just throwing it up to Keon Coleman. And you see the basketball skills in his game. He is so comfortable with his body control. He's so comfortable going up and playing the football. I don't know what you're going to do if you're a defensive coordinator in the ACC trying to deal with the guy in Keon Coleman, trying to deal with the guy in Johnny Wilson. And he said he's going to be there for 8 to 9 months, which sounds like he's planning on going to the 2024 NFL draft after this year. But he does have 2 years of eligibility left. And you saw a lot of guys at Florida State decide to come back for their senior season because they know how special this Florida State team can be. You got to be absolutely thrilled with the weapons. And it's so funny because we're talking about this Florida State wide receiver room, and I know you lost Micah Pittman 2 years ago. I mean, there wasn't a body in that wide receiver room that you felt good about. Mike Norvell hammers the transfer portal. He gets Hakeem Williams in the 2023 class, and now we're talking about potentially the best wide receiving core in the ACC and one of the better groups in all of college football. Mike Norvell has done a phenomenal job just completely revamping what this wide receiver room looks like. And a guy that nobody's even talking about, and I don't necessarily blame them, but take a look at a guy in Winston Wright, who is the guy that I was most excited for heading into the 2022 season. And then you obviously know the car accident, doesn't play in 2022. He's another guy that I think will be a starter for Florida State. So you're looking at Johnny Wilson, one of the best returning wide receivers in the country. Keon Coleman, quite frankly, one of the best wide receivers that's returning in the country. Winston Wright, who I think is a sleeping giant. Hakeem Williams, who I don't necessarily know what you're going to get from him as a true freshman, but there's not many better, bigger body wide receivers to learn from than a guy like Johnny Wilson and a guy like Keon Coleman. So I like that aspect of it too. Then you throw in Jaheim Bell and Kyle Morlock, two of the more talented tight ends who do a little bit of a different thing. Jaheim Bell, kind of a utility guy. Kyle Morlock, just a big bodied dude who can go up and play above the rim as well. Jordan Travis is going to have a solid offensive line because they did a very good job with that in the transfer portal. He's going to have a phenomenal run game. Trey Benson being one of the better running backs in the whole entire country. And then a plethora of weapons to get to work. This is going to sound crazy, but print the Heisman shirts. Because I think Jordan Travis, you're asking me for, I don't even know if you call Jordan Travis a dark horse at this point. Like, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and he's surrounded by some of the best offensive playmakers in the country. Like, Jordan Travis has a legitimate shot at being the Heisman, and talk about this a lot. This is the year that I think Florida State can kind of take back the ACC. Because Clemson, you have K. Klubnik coming in. He's new. You don't really know what you have with him. Florida State, you know exactly what you have. This is a bona fide top 5, top 6, top 7 team in the country. They have a ton of returners coming back. I believe they're top 5 in returning production off a team that was a top 10 team in the country last year. Like, if you're a Florida State fan, like, you have to be absolutely thrilled with how this season's playing out. I do want to recap just what they've done in the transfer portal because we've kind of been doing these segments on just recapping some of the teams that we really enjoyed or we really are high on in terms of the transfer portal class. Not many better teams did it than Mike Norvell. And this is his 10th transfer that he's bringing in. He did bring a JUCO kid in too as well the other night. But what I'm most pleased with Florida State is they didn't use the transfer portal like some other schools, maybe like an Ole Miss, for example, that you're just bringing in anyone you can get. Like Florida State had some potential holes in their depth chart, and they used the transfer portal to kind of address those holes and just get quality dudes. This wasn't a class that you're bringing in 25 guys from off the street. These are legitimate dudes who are coming from schools, whether they're just from the G5 and they were just too good to play in the G5, or guys like Fentrell Cypress who are coming from a broken program in Virginia. Take a look at the guys they brought in. Gilbert Edmond, a starter for South Carolina. Keandre Jones just going to add depth, potentially be a starter on that offensive line. But Fentrell Cypress, one of the best cornerbacks in America last year. Braden Fisk going to be a massive, massive addition with losing a guy like Robert Cooper on the defensive line. Casey Roddick, probably going to. Jeremiah Byers, I've heard really good things about him. And then Kyle Morlock, Jaheim Bell, Darrell Jackson. Like all of these guys are starting caliber players that I don't know if they're necessarily going to start on Florida State. They're for sure going to add some depth to the unit, but it's more about the quality of players they brought in. Like those are 10 guys who are going to be difference makers for Florida State into 2023. You combine that with how much production they have coming back from what was such a good team last year. We go back and talk about it. If Florida State was healthy for that stretch against Wake Forest, Clemson, and NC State, I think you're talking about a way different season than what you saw from Florida State in 2022. But you have Florida State play Clemson or play Wake Forest, play NC State later on in the year after the bye week, after they were all healthy. I don't know if I'm picking against Florida State in any of those games. Like that team was a legitimate top 10 team last year. They returned their quarterback. They returned pretty much every single impact player they had on that team last year. Jared Verse coming back. This is going to be a special season for Florida State. I think it's a down year for the ACC, but an up year for Florida State in a big way. Florida State, it's hard to pick against a team like that to win an ACC title. And quite frankly, I don't think a lot of people would call me crazy to say this is a college football playoff team. You look at their schedule, you look how it lines up. Feed me that LSU game. I cannot wait for that game because LSU is a damn good football team too. You're going to get a real feel for how good Florida State is during week one. This is a very fun team to keep an eye on. Again, I wanted to hop on and talk about a guy in Keon Coleman who, take a look at the wide receivers in the transfer portal, he was arguably the best one. And you beat out a team like Ole Miss, you beat out a team like Texas A&M to get it done. Massive, massive addition for the Florida State Seminoles. I cannot wait to see Jordan Travis cook with all the weapons that he has at his disposal. Appreciate you guys checking us out as usual. Again, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.